So finally, President's rule has been imposed in Manipur.
Earlier in the evening, enforcing President's rule in the state.
President's rule has been imposed in Manipur.
President's rule has been imposed in Manipur. The President's rule comes after the Chief Minister's crisis.
Under Article 356 of our Constitution. Now Manipur, which is burning.
Manipur is burning.
Since May 2023, is in news since the last many years due to a conflict between certain communities of Manipur. That is Kuki-Zo community and Methi community, and the conflict is around a lot of issues. And in this issue, thousands of people, hundreds and thousands of people, they have been displaced. Many people have lost their lives, including police officials, including army personnel and different other peoples as well. Now in all this scenario, recently, after the resignation of Chief Minister of Manipur, when there was no consensus on the candidate who will become a Chief Minister, Centre has imposed President's rule under Article 356 of our Constitution in Manipur. Now the State Assembly is currently in suspended animation. That means it has not been suspended fully, it might revive if the President's rule is uplifted. Now this will help the region in few areas. Firstly, the administration would now be of the central government directly. President would directly be managing the whole state through the governor. So there will be a neutral administration, and the allegations of biased administrations handling ethnic violence, that would erode down. That is the first thing. Second is, now there would be electoral stability, which will prevent the governance erosion by ending the internal disputes in the region. And alongside this, relief and rehabilitation process will get an impetus. So all these are the positives. Now what is this President rule which has been imposed? Under what criteria, what conditions, what will be the impact, and is it going to solve the problem and the issue of Manipur or not? All the questions we'll be trying to address in this particular session. Hello, my name is Preetpal Singh and you are watching Perspective. Now first question is, what is this President's rule? See, the Indian Constitution under Part 18, that is Article 352 to Article 360, talks about three types of emergencies. One is the national emergency, which is under Article 352. Second is President's rule under Article 356, which you also call as state emergency. And third is financial emergency under Article 360. So right now in Manipur, President's rule under Article 356 has been imposed. Now before Article 356, there is Article 355, which states and mandates the union government to protect the states against external aggression, that is first thing, and internal disturbances, and ensure governance as per constitutional provisions in the state. But you might ask that if a state is put under President's rule, what actually happens? So in actuality, President's rule imposition refers to suspension of the government of that state, plus the legislative assembly placing the state under the direct control of the central government. So now the state would be directly run by the central government. Definitely President would be running the state through the help of the governor. Now Article 355 also states that if a state government fails to maintain or fails to function as per the Constitution of India, the centre can intervene under Article 356 and impose President's rule. That is what Article 355 says. And one thing which you already know is that President's rule is also known as state emergency or constitutional emergency as well. Now let us very separately talk about the grounds for proclamation of this emergency. Now under Article 356, the President can proclaim emergency or can impose President's rule if a situation arises that the state government cannot function as per the Constitution. And this can be done in two ways. First is either on the recommendation of the governor, and second is through President's discretion. So President's discretion can be even without the governor's report. First condition is either governor sends a report that the state government can't be run on the basis of the Constitution, or President can use their own discretion in order to impose a President's rule in the state. And that can be done even without the governor's report. And as I've already told you, that Article 365 says that if a state fails to adhere to central government's directions and also cannot function constitutionally, then under Article 356, President's rule can be imposed. Now the question is about parliamentary approval. That is parliamentary approval required or not? Definitely the answer is yes, it is required. So a proclamation of President's rule must be approved by both the houses of parliament within 2 months of imposing President rule in a state. Now if a President rule is declared in a state when the Lok Sabha is dissolved, or if it dissolves within the 2 months without approving the proclamation, in that case proclamation or imposition remains valid till 30 days after the Lok Sabha reconvenes. And provided that the Rajya Sabha has approved this during the period. Also, approving or extending the president's rule in a state, it requires a simple majority. That is, majority of the members which are present and voting, that's all. But the real question is that president rule can be imposed in a state for how long? See, ideally and normally, president's rule under Article 356 is imposed for 6 months. And it can be extended up to 3 years. Multiple time reimposition can happen, and it can be extended up to 3 years with parliamentary approval, that is parliament's approval, after every 6 months. Although there is one caveat. The 44th Constitutional Amendment of 1978, it allows extending president's rule for more than 1 year only in case of certain circumstances. On one condition, that if there is a national emergency which is in force across India or any parts of the state, or second case is that the Election Commission certifies that the election to the state assemblies cannot be done due to difficulties. If these two conditions are there, in that case, for more than 1 year, president's rule can be imposed in a state. But definitely, it has to be ratified by the parliament every 6 months. Now, the question is that beyond 3 years, can president rule be extended? The answer is yes. But for that, what is required? For that, constitutional amendment is required, which was done earlier by 67th Amendment Act of 1990 and 68th Amendment Act of 1991, which extended president's rule in the state of Punjab beyond 3 years during Punjab insurgency. Now we know about president's rule, we know about the constitutional provisions, we know how it can be imposed and for how long it can be imposed. The real question is, what happens when president's rule is imposed? One thing already we have seen earlier, that the state government is dissolved and the state legislative assembly is also dissolved. In this case, in Manipur's case, it has not been dissolved, but it has been temporarily suspended. And experts are calling it as suspended animation. But what are the powers which the central government gets of the state government? So let's talk about different powers. Let's first talk about executive powers. Now the president takes over the state functions. Governor would be administering on the behalf of the president, which will be assisted by the chief secretaries and appointed advisors of the governor. So executive function in total would be taken over by the governor, who will be working on the behalf of the President of India. That is executive function. Talk about legislative function. Now, since the state assembly is dissolved or suspended, in either of the cases, Parliament would be exercising its powers or delegating the lawmaking authority to the President or a specified body. So the lawmaking power for that particular state now goes to the Parliament of India, that is Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, or whoever authority or whatever authority Parliament may deem fit. That is under legislative powers. Also, one more very important fact here is that laws made under president's rule remain in force in the state unless they are repealed by the state assemblies after the president rule has been withdrawn. So they remain in place until and unless they are repealed explicitly by the state legislatures. That is a very important point. And when you talk about the financial control, one, we have talked about the executive powers. We have already talked about the legislative powers. Now, in case of financial control, financial power, the president can authorize expenditure from state consolidated fund until it is approved by the parliament. So that is what president can do. But one question is that can president of the Parliament of India can take over the judicial powers as well? The answer is a big no. So the president cannot assume high court powers under state emergency or under president's rule. That is a very important thing which we should be knowing about. And what about the revocation? So if we talk about revocation, president can revoke president's rule anytime without the consent of Parliament of India. So whenever the president may deem fit, of course, after the central government or the cabinet suggests the president to do so, whenever president deems fit that president's rule needs to be withdrawn, in that case, president might revoke president's rule in a particular state. And that happens without a parliamentary approval. So while we are talking about president's rule, since the year 1950, there have been 134 instances till now where president's rule has been imposed in different states. And in Manipur, president's rule has been imposed 11 times, which is historic. Now, while so many times central government has used it as a tool to restore and ensure constitutional supremacy in the country, there have been several instances where this thing has been misused by the central government as well, due to certain political vested interest. Which is why Honorable Supreme Court of India time and again have intervened and set up certain guidelines in relation to the imposition of president's rule in the states. And one very remarkable case law is in case of SR Bommai case of 1994. Now in this case, Honorable Supreme Court of India highlighted one thing, that imposition of president's rule in a state under Article 356 is a part of judicial review and is subject to judicial review. Also, they suggested that state government's dismissal should be on the basis of floor test in that particular state assembly rather than just governor's opinion. That is one major thing highlighted in SR Bommai's case. And also the court emphasized in SR Bommai case that Article 356 should be invoked only as a last resort and should not be done for political purposes. This was explicitly highlighted by the Honorable Supreme Court of India. And also the court ruled that the president cannot dissolve a state's assembly without parliament's approval. And first they have to give a warning to the state government before dismissing and dissolving the state assembly. Also, one more remarkable decision was taken in 2005 under Sarbananda Sonowal case. Now under this, the powers for the central government under Article 355 of our constitution were enhanced and broadened. So the scope was broadened, enabling the union government to take wider actions to uphold state's governance and constitutional principles in the state. That was under this particular case. And also there is the very next year, Rameshwar Prasad case. And in this case, Honorable Supreme Court of India explicitly condemned the Bihar Assembly's dissolution without a floor test and also criticized the political misuse of Article 356 of our constitution. And Supreme Court highlighted that Article 356 cannot be used to combat social evils like defection. And also immunity under Article 361 does not prevent the court from reviewing the validity of actions taken under the president rule. Now, based on these reviews and based on these judgments by the Supreme Court, several commissions time and again, which have been formed by the central government and different other associations, time and again have given certain recommendations of certain changes or how this president's rule can be invoked and in what circumstances. So, for example, Sarkaria Commission of 1987, they have recommended using Article 356 very sparingly, that is, using it as the last resort, and also when all the other alternatives fail to resolve the state's constitutional breakdown. This is what Sarkaria Commission says. It also says that the governors should not remove the Council of Ministers as long as they ensure or as long as they enjoy majority in the state assembly. That is what Sarkaria Commission had to say. There is another commission of 2010, that is Punchi Commission. So Punchi Commission has proposed localizing emergency provisions. It has suggested that Article 355, Article 356 should allow governor's rule in localized areas like districts or part of it for up to 3 months. And that is what was the recommendation of Punchi Commission. And it also suggested that to avoid misuse, the central government should align its functioning and provisions to what were detailed in SR Bommai's judgment of 1994 and should ensure clarity in preserving center-state's relationship, harmonious relationship between center and the state. Also additional to this, National Commission for Review for the Working of Constitution, NCRWC's recommendations were also there, which also said that Article 356 should not be deleted from the constitution, but it should be used very sparingly, again as a measure of last resort. And it also highlighted that misuse of Article 356 can be curtailed by having a clear criteria for non-compliance of the state government before the president's rule has been imposed. And also it suggested that the governor's report needs to be very detailed, mentioning all the things which have led to the constitutional machinery being failed in the particular state. So detailing of the governor report will ensure that the misuse of president's rule is not there in the country. Also alongside this, Interstate Council under 263 article of our constitution has also highlighted that the president's rule, governor's report on the recommendation for imposition of president's rule should be very detailed and exhaustive report. And also state at fault should be receiving a warning from the president first before the president rule is imposed. And a special majority should be required before ratifying the approval for imposition of president's rule. This is what Interstate Council has recommended. Now, since we are clear about the president's rule imposition in a particular state, let us see very quick facts. The first time when president rule was imposed in India in any of the state was in 1951. In June 1951, it was first imposed in Punjab when the then Chief Minister CM Gopi Chand Bhargava resigned due to internal differences. Also, if you see the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir, it has been under president's rule for 15 long years. From 1990 to 1996, there are 6+ years. So from 2019 to 2024, again 6+ years. So these are 2 continuous stints. And over several years also, altogether 15+ years, Jammu and Kashmir has seen under president's rule, that is direct rule of the central government. But most affected state first has been Manipur, where president's rule has been imposed 11th time. And one more affected state is that of UP, where it has been imposed more than 10 times. Also in 1977, very peculiar incident happened where Morarji Desai's government imposed president's rule simultaneously in the 9 Congress-ruled states in the country and cited loss of public confidence. And when in 1980, Srimati Indira Gandhi ji will come to power, the government would retaliate and they would impose further a president's rule in again continuous 9 states. So basically it involved mass imposition of president's rule in 1977 and 1980 in our country. But the statistics show that from 1950 to 1994, there have been 100 instances of imposition of president's rule. But from 1994 to 2024, there have been only 30 instances, which means 1 instance a year on an average. So which clearly shows that instances in relation to president's rule imposition in our states has reduced in the last many decades. In the last 3 to 4 decades, the instance has reduced. And as you all know, in S.R. Bomai's judgment of 1994, Supreme Court of India has laid a review test that the courts can review a president rule based on a review criteria. And that review criteria has certain points. And the first criteria is that whether the president's proclamation was issued based on any material evidence or not. That is the first thing. And whether the material was relevant or not. That is the second thing. And third is, was the proclamation issued in any bad faith? Or was there a malified intention? That is the third criteria which Honorable Supreme Court of India can use while reviewing a president's rule imposition. So now when we talk about Manipur as a region, definitely the president's rule has been imposed, but the state assembly has not been dissolved yet. So again, there is a suspended animation as of now in Manipur. So when the president rule is revoked, automatically the assembly will start functioning itself. However, the constitution does not talk about any suspended animation, but it has been a tool which is used by the central government to ensure normalcy in Manipur. So once normalcy is restored, maybe after a few months, and once consensus on the chief minister is made by the state assembly, it might revive and it might resuscitate. But the point is just one, is going to bring any peace in the Manipur region at all or not? We have already covered about Manipur in one of our earlier videos. You can watch that video to understand comprehensively about the Manipur issue and why Manipur is burning. But is this a temporary solution, temporary fix, or a long-term solution, a step towards a long-term solution in Manipur? It is for us to see. I hope you gained a new perspective from the session. Please let me know what are your views surrounding president's rule in the state and what are your views surrounding its imposition and how it was imposed. I hope you have a great day. All the very best and have a beautiful day. Thank you.